Good
Sounds
morning,
great.
good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Jason's Take On podcast series with myself, Jason Noble, in a chilly London this morning, and my partner in crime, Mr. Whitehead. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason.
We are today diving into a really, what I think is a really key topic for 2025, all around efficiency. And the title of today's episode is Chasing Efficiency, Don't Kill Growth by Cutting Customer Success. Everywhere you look, we're seeing founders looking to cut spending. They're chasing leaner operations for various reasons, the right reasons. But the big question is pulling back on customer success actually the fastest way to do this? And we're joined today by a guest, by Dan Griffith. Dan is someone that I've done a LinkedIn live session with a month or so ago, maybe, Dan. Really phenomenal
Yeah.
session. Dan's a global enterprise sales expert with over 20 years experience helping software and service companies really break into big scale enterprise organizations with a focus on healthcare, medical, banking, financial services, and insurance. A lot of regulated organizations there. He's guided companies through investment rounds, through exits. He's helped generate significant amounts in client revenue. And he also hosts his own podcast, the weekly podcast called Seriously Don't Do That, which is a phenomenal name. Dan, welcome, sir. Really good to have you with us.
Thanks. Man, I'm so excited about being here, getting to talk with you all. Jason, like you said, great conversation a couple weeks ago, and looking forward to another great one today.
I love it, Dan. Look, well, let's kind of kick the conversation off. I think the conversation we had on the LinkedIn live session, there's a lot of focus around AI. We're seeing a lot of push on that, quite rightly, in different areas, not just in customer success, but we are also seeing pressure on investment, on funding, on money coming in, and where that money is being spent. And I'd really love to kind of continue that conversation and just get your kind of starting thoughts. But what are you seeing in the market about where people are cutting spending, cutting investment? Are you seeing it impacting customer success? And if so, what are people's takes on that?
Yeah, so I think we're seeing a little bit everywhere, right? I mean, I think whether it's a small organization, large organization, and I think there's pressure, especially in publicly traded organizations, to make those, quote, AI cuts. And I've seen it. I've seen probably. I think maybe the burden has fallen a little disproportionately on customer success, which I think is the wrong place to focus. Just transparently and interestingly enough, I wrote an article that we'll release the next couple of weeks that I think they ought to cut it on the SDR BDR side, which is not going to be popular with SDRs and BDRs, but there's a reason around that. Maybe I'm throwing you guys into my own controversy here, but I think when you think about the customer success function, you can AI can be used to enhance that function greatly, right? Because I mean, and I think when we talked about customer success and AI, there's a lot of things that a manual task that you could do that AI can help you with, meeting notes, follow up. I mean, all the things that are really kind of the core principles of customer success, report, going across your calls for customer success to gain insights. But that still is a very, to me, is a very human driven activity. In the enterprise. Now, if you've got a, you know, $39 a month SaaS product, then, maybe you don't need that. But when you get into the enterprise, those are relationships, and those are typically multi-tier relationships. And matter of fact, I think what's interesting is I've seen an uptick in more person-to-person meetings in customers in the customer success area, which is kind of interesting after COVID when we all went
Yep.
virtual. But I think those person-to-person meetings have become, even more critical and more important. So yeah, I just think that's an area, honestly, that should take more investment. And I said, if you're investing, you should be investing in the AI tools to make your customer success team that much more effective. Because ultimately, in software, it's the lifeblood of the business. If you don't maintain, really, I mean, most investors, if you're not maintaining it 90% plus, forget it. You're done.
Yep. You talked about kind of the BDR and SDR side there, and your controversial article coming out soon. Give us a little kind of taster of thoughts around
Yeah.
that. I'm curious because I've seen a lot of work being done on that. I know some great AI work being done to really transform that. I've also seen the same on customer success, so I'm really curious. Give us a taster.
Yeah, so I think so. If you think about the contrast, right, in organizations on that, we'll call it pre-sales and sales side, you typically had two, three, maybe four tiers. You have marketing, right? Then you've got um, like a BDR, then maybe an SDR, and then an account executive, right? That's, in a large organization, that's kind of your structure. On the customer success side, really, you might have two tiers. You might have customer
Yeah,
success
yeah.
and you might have support, right? But there's not that. So I mean, immediately you look at that and go, okay, what's wrong with this? With the way this is setting up. I think on the pre-sales or the marketing or the sales side, with AI, you can really eliminate that SDR, BDR, a lot of those functions by making your AE that more, or account executive, or whatever you want to call that kind of direct line salesperson. You can use AI to enhance what they're doing and eliminate a lot of that BDR and SDR role. And I think also there's still a lot of time wasted and a lot of noise with BDRs and SDRs, specifically around you know cold calling and all of that. And again, a lot of that is not effective. I mean, if you read LinkedIn, everybody on there is the best cold caller in the world. But I think about myself. I think about the last time that I bought anything off of a phone call, which was like never. And you think at the enterprise, people aren't buying stuff off of cold calls. So if you can take that AE and you can make them more efficient, make them more targeted, then you can really eliminate a lot of costs there. And with the companies that I'm advising, they that's a big investment. That could be $1 million investment,
Yeah.
just right out of the gate. And if you can cut that, I was talking to a fund out of San Francisco. If you can cut that from 1 million to 250,000,
Yeah.
that's a huge. I mean, then you're much more capital efficient. So yeah, so that's kind of the reasoning and my
Cool.
thoughts around that.
Very cool. So I'm curious, as you're talking with the different companies out there, and as we say, like, sounds like customer success teams are still getting cut or disproportionately so. What's the mindset shift that you think needs to happen in the investor level or the C-suite level to say, hey, we're looking in the wrong place and we're doing the wrong things?
Well, again, in SaaS, I I used, and this was even before really the SaaS model came out, right? When we were
Mhm.
dealing with, I think we're all old enough to remember when we had the perpetual software license, right? Where
Yep.
you buy the software and then you pay maintenance every year. And I remember working with customer success teams 15, 20 years ago and saying, look, we don't sell software, we sell maintenance. And to me, the core of a SaaS, that is the core. Because if you don't maintain that again at that 90% level,
Yeah.
then it's very,
Mhm.
very difficult to build a company that's a growing ARR, which obviously that's one of our signals of growth, but also to be your profitability to me is directly tied to the success of maintaining your customers, because that's how you get to that profitable model. Because you look at most companies, they, by the way, it could be true about life sciences, right, or pharmaceuticals.
Mhm.
A lot of money gets invested up front, or med tech. A lot of money gets invested up front coming up with the product. Same thing with developing, right? Your development costs are there at the beginning, and then you want to recoup those costs as quickly as possible. And the way you recoup that is, taking that initial sale that you might do for a year and then reselling, just getting that, keeping that in there, because every year that profitability goes up and your cost of acquisition goes down. And to me, that's the profitable model. Now, for long-term investors, private equity, family office, individual investors, um, that's great. For VC, that's a different story, because in my mind, a
Mhm.
VC is just going to try to you know blow up the company big enough so that the next person will buy it, right? Because that's really their goal. It's more of a flip. It's the difference. I always tell people
Right.
VCs are more like house flippers, and private equity family office are more like people that are going to buy a home and live in it for 10 years. It's a very different philosophy. But back to your question, I think I think the way they should be looking at that is, look, we need to maintain, or by the way, enhance. We're not even talking about enhancing that, right? If there's
Right.
upsell opportunities, because upsells 100% easier than trying to go find a new customer. And there's a lot of people that don't do that. All the focus, again, we talked about that imbalance.
Yep.
The SDRs, the BDRs, the AEs, all of that is focused on new business, which is probably 60 to 70% more costly than trying to get, to maintain and upsell the current business.
Do you think, just looking at the conversation around BDRs, SDRs, and similarly there, what we need to do about the growth engine, can we make customer success still more efficient? Because there's, you and I talked about, there is still a lot of admin that goes on there. But what I think we've got to do is balance that. Make it more efficient doesn't just mean cutting it. It means investing in the right places. So we can absolutely use AI to help enhance how we're delivering customer success. And if we look at this the same way as building a pipeline, how do we build that growth pipeline for our customers? How do we know which ones we can expand with more licenses, deliver more value, versus which ones we can build new services, new functions, and ultimately look at upsell? So is there rather than just trimming customer success, where should organizations be looking to kind of really make their investments more efficient in customer success, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. One area that I see that really very rarely ever gets used, except by very large organizations, is analytics. I mean, if you've got, I mean, because to me, that's a place where you can invest money and it's going to pay back in 3, 4, 5x multiples. Couple of places that are kind of easy ones are, just the way your customer talks about your product, right? So if you've got, you're using Otter or, whatever you might use with your calls, or you have that, incumbent in your CRM, just querying across those calls, how a customer describing, how are they describing their problems? What kind of things are they talking about that they need in the software? I mean, again, I think traditionally we relied on a customer success manager or executive or whatever we might call them, or rep, to gather that in a call, and we kind of hoped they got it. Well, there's no excuse now for not pulling that in. And then, of course, so that's kind of the individual call, but also across your calls. Same thing with your pricing. The other thing you should start to get, especially if you're managing customer success teams, is you ought to start to see signs that somebody's going to leave. And again, you can pick that up on a call, but you can also, the concept of social selling. You can also watch, LinkedIn profiles. Like if you have a contact in an account, or maybe 2 or 3 contacts, and their LinkedIn profile changes and they've made a job change, I mean, those are things that can really alert you. So rather than when you call that month or 2 months before the renewal to get the renewal, 9 months in advance, and you can prepare for that. So I think using those analytics and investing in those tools makes that customer success manager representative that much more efficient, because you might be able to go down from 10 to 8, but I think ultimately you can really shift that position or customer success from a reactive to a proactive position, and I think
Yeah.
that's the big win.
I like what you're saying there about the analytics. One of the challenges I've seen, though, is most software companies, their data is such complete crap that they're not in really a position to have meaningful analysis there. Have you seen that? And what sort of advice do you give to companies that are finding themselves in that situation?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we with what we do, we actually offer like a CRM cleanup, and that's probably the thing that most people grab onto, because, like you said, most people's CRMs are garbage. I mean, there's just, and it's garbage in, garbage out. I think but most of the time is because we're relying on a human to put that in there.
Yeah.
Right, we're relying on the person to
Mhm.
take effective notes and efficient notes and put that in there, and remember to put that in there. How many times have you gotten behind and you're like, oh, okay, I'll get to that, and it just doesn't get done, right? So it's,
Right.
but with today's world, there's really no excuse to not having some type of an automation that after that calls, like we use it internally. We built something for ourselves where as soon as a call is done, that goes into our CRM. The call goes in there. The notes from the call goes in there, and a follow-up email is generated, and we can even send that. I mean, and then it also goes into Notebook LM, which is where we keep
Mhm.
all of all of our customer facing calls. And then we're running an analysis on that every week, updating our voice of the customer. We're also looking at, okay, is there trends? Are people saying, so that can all be done with, I mean, that's probably a couple $1,000 investment to set something like that up. And that to me is a game changer. But yes, and should be able to overcome, but you'll have to do it. I always tell people that's a day forward strategy, right? Because sometimes people have 20 years worth of garbage in there. And I always say it's like you have a pipe that is, a broken water main that's pumping sewage into your
Yeah.
basement, right?
Yeah.
You can't just go in there and start cleaning up, right? You got to turn that pipe off, you got to fix it, and then you
Yep.
can clean up the mess, right? So I think we always think about that kind of as an approach, but and that's just one example, but there's plenty of others. But yeah, that's well, and I think overcoming the executive impression, um, like at the executive level, the impression of the CRM, right? Because most of them don't trust it.
Right. Right.
And you get
Absolutely.
to a large, well, you've got this whole ecosystem that's created in the company outside, right? It's why when in a big company and you go to let's say a executive board, everything's in spreadsheets. Nothing's coming directly from the CRM, right? It's all that
Right.
ecosystem because nobody trusts it, right? And now I'd be glad to be proven wrong on that because I haven't, I'm not in huge companies these days, but I can tell you from what I've seen, even in mid-sized companies, that's still the case.
Do you think
Absolutely.
today? Do you think today that organisations are looking at AI as a shortcut to being more efficient, and maybe doing? I mean, what you're doing is you're introducing that automation, but building intelligence into it. I think there's a risk where some organisations are just looking more at the automation side, not thinking about that. Well, we've got all this data, it's cleaner, it's more accurate, but what does it tell us? So that analytics piece is still missing. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing some organizations kind of investing in part of AI, but not then doing the full investments and not seeing the solid return on it?
I think if you look at larger organizations, and let's define what that is. Let's just say maybe a couple 100 million plus.
Yeah.
If you look at them, um, most of them are investing kind of in AI just for AI's sake. I mean,
Mhm.
I think there's
Yep.
there's there's a little bit of a, the executive says, okay, we've got to invest in AI, and people go out and start spending money, right? I mean, you just look at the spend. I mean,
Yeah.
I was looking at something the other day. They're talking about something like $7.4 trillion, in AI spend, and a lot of that is just people going out and buying stuff because they think, okay, we've got to have AI in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I think we're early in the hype cycle,
yeah,
right? So if you think about previous hype cycles, people spend a lot of money and then later on they figure out how to use it, right? But the smart
Yeah.
organizations, to me, are figuring out, okay, what is that tipping or that leverage point
yeah,
where we can use this effectively? And I think a lot of it has to do with analytics, and I think a lot of it has to do with, I would say, more intelligent type automation.
yeah.
Wow. What do you see as some of the risks around investing too much in the AI right now? Because I know some of us get in there like, oh, well, AI just made stuff up. And, are you finding it's actually at a point that you can reliably use it, or you think there's still some room to go there before companies should really jump with both feet?
I think it really depends on what you're going to use it for.
Hmm.
Um, I can speak, how we work with our clients and how we use it. We use it a lot around our content, but it
Hmm.
took us well, probably closer to 5 months to get that really fine tuned, right? To where we can,
Hmm.
we're writing in the voice of our customer now. We still review all of that. But I think, same thing with kind of our internal workflows around, talking with customers. We don't use it a lot with our deliverables, although we're starting to use that some. But I
Hmm.
think the biggest thing that people need to remember is or learn is how to write prompts, because most people don't do a great job in writing prompts. There are some some tools out there that allow you to write smarter prompts. I still don't think they're great, but what I find the biggest misconception is people just say, okay, I'm going to tell AI to do it. They do it. Well,
Yep.
AI's got to follow some level of instructions,
Right.
right? And it's got to understand a role, and and you got to start to build. You start to train that, right? You start to build that level of knowledge. So it takes some organizations. I think that the hygiene isn't there yet
Hmm.
for AI, and I think the expectations are way up here, way up high,
Yep.
and I think that the delivery is down low, and I think the gap there is in understanding prompt engineering and understanding using the right tool, right? Because we use, I don't know, probably 10 tools across,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
everyone we're using for like a different things. Like we use Claude more around written stuff. We use Chat more around, logical stuff. We're going to use Perplexity or Grok sometimes more for search. So there's a lot of things that you can, but I think a lot of people are just thinking it's like, the philosophy of hiring somebody, just throwing bodies at it. They're throwing AI
Right.
at it, and the results are, because I mean most of the projects you're looking at, the big projects are not succeeding, and I think a lot of that has to do with people just not understanding how to engineer prompts.
I think
Yeah.
that's really
It.
go on, Jace.
I was going to say it's kind of interesting to me. We're trying to get AI to think more like people, and yet the problem
Yeah.
we have is we need to get people to think more like
Yeah.
AI in their prompting. So it's sort of that little
Right.
disconnect there. But
It's
go
really
ahead, Mr.
interesting.
Well,
Middleman.
I was going to say over the weekend, so OpenAI have kind of released now as part of their training program,
Hmm.
like packages of prompts. So they're also helping people understand what it is. And actually, there is a
right.
whole section of prompts pre-packaged from OpenAI on customer success, which is great to see. So they're also
Hmm.
investing in how they can help people do it. I think it's absolutely right.
We're even using AI to write our prompts for us,
Yep,
which
yep.
is kind of which it could be
Yeah.
kind of fun because like we'll use Chat sometimes to write a Claude prompt, and then to go and criticize. My favorite thing to do, if you haven't done this, it's a lot of fun. Like when you want AI to analyze something for you, I always
Hmm.
say you're a 1980s Russian skating Olympic judge. Please evaluate below and tell me what it takes. Tell me what it takes to get a perfect 10. And it's so funny because it'll say, putting on my hat, and it'll say, it'll give you a very critical kind of, so it's fun to use those roles,
Oh,
and,
that's
and throw
brilliant.
them
Right.
at things.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing this afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
No,
Got to
it's,
check.
brilliant.
yeah. Yeah, it's a lot, but I think using it to provide, that's the other thing people don't use it for much, is the critical analysis, which I think that can be effective. But yeah, we're just we're just at the top of the hill though on learning how to use it.
If we're
Yeah.
sitting with your customers, and if you're in kind of one of your founders or a founder's seat right now, how do you balance those efficiency demands that you're getting from investors with keeping your customers growing? And I'd be really curious as well, are there any particular metrics that you're seeing founders, companies say these are the ones, or even investors, these are the ones that matter most, and this is what that change is going to do to it?
You're talking about with regards to AI or just
AI
overall?
impacting customer success, so the two together.
Yep, yep, yep. Um, I think I've hired for customer success roles, and they ask me what the KPIs are, and I'm like, there's one, and it's renewal rate, right? Yeah, and I say that jokingly, but in reality, that is the key one there. So I think if you can drive that, I think you can also talk about engagement,
Yep.
right? Because you can use a net promoter score. Although we could have a whole hour and a half show on NPS because there's but I think ultimately engagement and renewal rate,
Yep.
and I think even maybe a third would be upsell opportunity,
Yep.
because especially if you're
Mhm.
selling into an enterprise, very few people buy an enterprise license out of the gate. So, and with organizations now becoming more and more you know departmentally driven, there's always opportunities. Because I think, to me, those would be the three that I probably hear about the most. That are the things that are being driven and impacting. Because it's very hard. People say, "Well, efficiency." Well, that's sometimes that's very difficult to measure.
Yeah.
Right.
in a short period of time. I mean, you could maybe, over 3 years or, over 18 months, you could see, okay, I was doing it with 5, I'm now doing it with 4. What are but I think ultimately, if you can drive an uptick in retention, you can drive an uptick in upsell opportunity, and if you can drive an uptick in engagement, those to me are kind of that's the golden triangle as I would see it.
Right. Dan, as I was listening to you earlier talking about like AI in the hype cycle and where it is, it kind of got me thinking here that I think customer success for a long time was in the hype cycle, and people were throwing money at it and hiring people like crazy, and we'll get the CS platforms and we'll do all this stuff. And I think where we are right now, it seems like that hype cycle is kind of broken, and now customer success really needs to deliver and prove that it's delivering. And I'm kind of wondering, if that's the premise, what do you see as the things that customer success most needs to be doing now to prove its value that it's not doing today?
I think, so going back to what we were talking about in the last
Mhm.
question is, because the sole KPI was retention, right? People would look at, because I've been in an organization that got $1 billion worth of funding,
Yeah.
which, you want to talk about people spending money like drunk sailors. That was, that
Yeah.
was that was
That's
it.
almost real money. Yeah.
And yeah, and they built these huge customer success teams. And I think what was true then is also true now, that they invested all that money. They said, okay, we're trying to retain, but there was no idea what the happy path was on what a customer that is successful
Hmm.
and happy and that is glad to renew looked like, and what one that might be in danger, what one that just absolutely wasn't renewed. It was always a surprise when they got to whatever that independent organization. Could be a 90-day
Yep.
cycle, it could be a 30-day cycle, but it just felt like every month when I would see those reports coming in, it was always a surprise about people that on both sides, people that renewed and that
Right.
people did and it wasn't because the customer success people weren't engaged. I mean, they were engaged, but there was nothing that said, okay, this is what a happy customer looks like. This is what a customer that's just, that could be leaving. Here's what a customer that's not happy look like. And I think, kind of creating those I think to me, that's the key, really understanding what that, what those customers look like. And then the proactive versus the reactive, because I think most organizations are built to be reactive.
Yep.
I mean,
Hmm.
that's just the thought.
Yeah.
And I think being proactive,
Absolutely.
especially in that space, being proactive. I mean, it's a little harder on the sales side, but it's, and again, there's a lot that's going on there on that side. But
Hmm.
on the customer success side, to me, there's no reason not to be proactive, because you should be, engaging with the customers. And I think the one other thing I would just mention is looking at customer success as a way to deliver value. I think a lot of that is looked at on the sales side, right? How are we going to deliver value or perceive value to our customers? And I think sometimes that gets dropped on the customer success side. Is how do we continue providing value? How are we continually updating our software? How are we, taking that user feedback and saying, I work with one organization, honestly, is I would say most of the Fortune 500 SaaS companies could look at this company and learn something from it, but they are very, very customer driven when it comes to their development. They're not crazy on it. They stay on their roadmap, but they integrate that, and they integrate it quickly. And it's not a huge development organization, but because of that, their average customer has been there 10 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that to me is they're always trying to deliver value to their current customer, sometimes even at the expense of sales, right?
Hmm.
But they are delivering that value to the customer.
It's fascinating. I mean, that the reality is that value and consistently delivering it and growing that value is why customers come to us. It's
Right.
why they stay with us, why they grow with us. I think that's fundamental. Dan, this has been a superb conversation. Thank you again for your time. What we always like to do with our guests at the end is give them what we call a bold challenge question. So it's a big
All
question.
right.
And the one
Okay.
for you, if you were standing in front of every SaaS founder today and could only give one non-negotiable directive about customer success, what would it be? Big and bold.
So this will be the part where you have to cut out some of the noise as I'm thinking about this here. I would I would say this: seriously, don't underestimate the power of customer success to drive growth.
I love that. Short, succinct, but that's the message.
Yeah,
And I think that
absolutely.
absolutely is what, or it's customer success done right is in any business, not just SaaS. It's a growth engine. It really is. And this is what we want. Dan, a superb note to wrap up on. Thank you so much. Efficiency matters, but not at the cost of killing our growth engine today. Great conversation. A big thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and Dan, we always like to invite you to give a shameless
we do.
plug for yourself, your organization, anything out there that you would like
Yeah.
to let people know. So go for it.
Yes, so I always like to say I'm in business because I like to help people, and we really enjoy helping our customers. So if you have folks that are listening that are at, I'll call it an inflection point in their business, either they've just received funding, they're going for funding, they're entering a new market, we'd love to have the opportunity to talk with them and see if we can help them grow and continue to be successful. I'll even mention we're doing a lot now with companies that are coming into the US market. So specifically, if you're doing that, we'd love to have a conversation with you, have what we call our growth readiness audit that we'll send out to you that you can look at, and would love to have a call with you and talk with you about it.
Fantastic. And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
There's LinkedIn is perfect. I'm on LinkedIn every single day. They can also send me an email at dan@greatergaingroup.com, and would love to have a conversation.
Fantastic. And we'll include a link to your
Yeah.
bio in our show notes. So
Thanks again,
thank you
Dan.
so much, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Bye.